Hi, it's Jen from Shabby Fabrics here with the Enchanted Garden supplementary videos. If you have already joined the program, congratulations. This program has been very popular, and as you know, this is the second time we've ran this program. And this is based on Jason Yenter's Enchanted Garden design. I fell in love with it years ago, and we offered it initially in boutiques. And I've been waiting for the perfect collection to reintroduce that. And as you can see, the quilt is spectacular. Everyone here that sees that at Shabby Fabrics has commented on the beauty of that. So just know, get ready for compliments. People will want to study the quilt. It's really fun. Of course, no two blocks are alike. So let's talk what you can expect all throughout 12 months. In the very beginning, in your first shipment, of course, you'll be getting an image of the straight on image of the quilt, so you can study that, but you'll also be getting a close-up image of each block. We know this quilt is all about the details, so each month you'll be getting your close-up full color of your block. This is block 1 in the top left here. I know a good part of that may be out of your view, but we'll see it from the overhead camera. So let's just look at our full color diagram and the information contained so that I can help you be successful each month and you can enjoy your journey of making your heirloom quilt. So as you can see, of course, we have the full image of the block. On the left side, we'll be sure to show you which fabrics we use for the piecing. That will be this kind of sashing detail. And then the fabrics on the right will be the applique. And as you know, those are pre-fused and laser cut for you. You can just imagine, as we look at the intricacy of these pieces, if you thought about tracing and cutting those out on your own, that is an incredible undertaking. Just look at the intricacies of some of these shapes. So I love this speed and the precision of laser cuts. We can just jump into the fun, peel the paper backing off, iron it down, and we are stitching. And of course, we need to do some piecing. Let's go ahead and move down into our instructions. They talk about cut your strips. What are they talking about? Well, in your first shipment, you'll be getting a strip roll. There's 28 strips in here. We have this custom made for you. And with the strip roll, it says cut 8 2.5 by 4.5 inch rectangles. And that's what we'll be using for our piecing throughout each of the 12 blocks throughout our quilt. And the great news is we have plenty of those pieces left over. And if you did go ahead and purchase the Oops Kit, which is now sold out, you have a built-in insurance policy so that if you do make any mistakes in your piecing and you don't want a seam rip, you can just grab that Oops Kit. Maybe you've lost a piece of your applique. You can grab that fabric. You can flip your diagram over, trace that, iron some fusible webbing to the back of your fabric and recut your shape. So that's what the Oops Kits are for. Now, here's another great thing. Even if you didn't get the Oops Kit, you kind of have a little bit of an insurance policy too, and here's what I mean. From the strip rolls, we're going to cut 8 out of each one of the strips, 2.5 by 4.5 inch. So 4.5 by 8, that is, let's see, that's 32, that's 36 inches. So that's going to leave you about an 8-inch segment of that fabric. So let's say that you did lose an applique shape. Well, you've already got that fabric inside your strip roll. Again, flip that placement guide upside down on the light box, trace your shape on some fusible webbing, iron that down to that little piece of leftover strip roll, and you're able to recut your shape. So that's a really nice option for you. So once you have all of your rectangles cut out, you'll be using it, you will have a total of 224. You'll have 68 of those left over. So as you can see, this was the arrangement that we liked. Maybe you want to do a different arrangement of colors. Do whatever you love. So that you'll be doing right up front when you initially get your strip roll. So go ahead and do that. A little bit of cutting initially, but once that's done, you only have to cut those the one time. Each month, of course, you'll be getting your laser shapes in a package. You'll also be getting your background fabric, and you'll be getting your sashing. This is such a beautiful print here. I could not resist. It had all the colors in it. That's why I chose it. And we just want to point out the instructions for laser cut. The reason I mention that is initially when you are piecing your rectangles together, of course, we're going to have our iron on a full hot setting. Same with our sashing as we're assembling that block background. But once you get ready to do the applique, please be sure to dial that heat back down to a more medium setting, because heat and bond light and really any fusible applique product is sensitive to being overheated. So I just wanted to call your attention to make sure you're using the correct setting of heat on your iron. All right, so as you can see, the background is assembled and then the applique goes on top of that. So let's just talk about sewing our rectangles together. Because they are cut to the precise width that you will be sewing them together, it's very important that you're using an accurate 1/4 inch seam allowance and they're lined up nicely so that they just stack one after the other. And I do want to call your attention to the pressing instructions here that are down below in the block assembly. As you can see, we have very specific arrows pointing in this direction and some pointing in that direction. And the reason being is that when these seams are meeting here, we want to have interlocking seams. That's always helps the blocks lay as flat as they can be, so the quilt has a nice flat profile to it. So that's why we have some varying pressing instructions along our strip unit. Same as for here. So you can see some of those are pressed this direction, but the majority being pressed that way, so that when the block is assembled, again, we have interlocking units. So let me put those aside for now. There's one fabric that's going to be happening again and again in your kits. You just move that aside. And that's that beautiful, this strip right here. I want to point out that, I have a desire for that to be kind of fussy cut, because as you can see in your kit, I know that fabric manufacturers always desire everything to be printed perfectly on grain. Doesn't always happen, right? So that's where we get to use our 2.5 inch ruler or whatever ruler you choose. And I simply laid that along. I kind of designated my spot of my diamonds. Of course, I would press my fabric out perfectly. And you can see this line right here? It's starting to come in this direction. So, and let me just iron that. I want you to see this clearly, what I'm referring to. Whenever I have a fabric that plaids, ginghams, and now this design, for me, I really want those to be fussy cut. So I can see that if I lay my ruler on here, while it appears that I'm kind of cutting at this angle, that's going to help. Like, I'm going to choose that one right there, that line right there. And we've given you a wider piece than necessary. You're going to be cutting this to 2.5 inches. That's exactly how you would cut that, kind of establish that line. That way, when you do cut it, your kind of squares are fussy cut and they're running parallel with your sewing line. So I just wanted to mention that. If you've been sewing for any amount of time, no doubt you know exactly how to fussy cut and get the lineup that you would like. So those are cut. Of course, you'll be referring to those. Now for the background, all of your backgrounds are going to be cut to 10.5 inches square. Obviously, you're going to use whatever ruler you choose. I love using the Creative Grid 10.5 inch ruler. This is a puzzle. This quilt really has to lock together very precisely in order to coordinate with the next block. Therefore, if I have a tool that will help me be precise, I want to use it. I would use this with in conjunction with a spinning mat, where I'm pressing my fabric, of course, flat first, cutting 2 sides, rotating the mat, and having a perfectly squared up 10.5 to start with. Once you have that, let me put this aside. Let's just grab out our pieces and then we can talk about our block assembly, and then I definitely want to dive into our applique. By the way, this is your backing option, still I think available. Oops, kits are gone. So I apologize if you missed out on that. We're always just projecting. People realize an oops kit is a great option. Not only does it just help you relax, it's an insurance policy. If you wanted to make a coordinating project, now you have the fabric. So those are great to have. All right, let's grab our 10.5 inch background, which I've already cut, And let's refer to, we'll use this kind of as our layout diagram, and you can see that the entire background is pieced. Well, we would be piecing this, sewing those right side together. And again, we're giving you pressing instructions here. So you want to be sure to follow those. And let's grab here. And again, you can see we're pressing right here. Both are pressing toward the sashing. Our bottom portion will go on. And I know it looks like it's not going to fit, but once it's all pieced together, it will. That'll go on. Followed by this. I will get that ready. In fact, I'll do that off camera. I want to be able to jump into the placement guide, the light box. That is such an important part of this because it can be difficult to see through black, nearly impossible if you're not using some assistance of a light box or a really bright light of some kind. So I definitely want to get into that process. So nothing mysterious here. Sew those together, 1/4 seam allowances. I would definitely recommend that you have this piece on top so that you don't get any rolled seams. And when I come back, that will be pieced and we'll be moving on to our applique. So the background is now pieced and we're ready to move on to the applique. So I've moved the light box into position. This is the wafer 2. This one, as you can see, this is the area where the applique will be occurring. I'm a little crowded. If your budget will take it, the wafer 3, which is the bigger light box, would be my first go-to, but we're going to make this one work. And I've got my laser shapes here, and we'll be using our placement guide. So let me just move my block out of the way. We've drawn a line around the frame of your block. That's the black portion that we'll be lining up on. Now, I love that the wafer series of light boxes has a varying intensity of light. You will absolutely want to have the brightest setting that you can. Because we're on video and because of the overhead camera, I can't turn mine on as bright as I would love for it to be. Otherwise, it'll blow off the camera. So let's just turn it on. I can still see, I'm just scooting my fabric down so it fits right inside that drawn box. I can still see my shapes, which I love that. I'm just going to scoot that over just a touch. I can absolutely see that. I could not place those without that. You would be really trying to visually guess where those go. So again, this is the wonderful world of laser cut shapes. By the way, we have nested these shapes so closely. In fact, let me just pop these all out. I want to show you what I'm talking about. Just when you think there aren't any more shapes in there, there are. So go ahead, keep a box handy, a bag, something where you're going to put this inside that bag because it could be the smallest little tiny berry. There are some really small portions of this quilt. So when you're convinced that all those applique shapes have been punched out, maybe they haven't been. I think I have, but I'm going to still set that aside, and that's really all that's left over. So once you have your shapes, just with your thumb, if you roll that back and just give it a push, notice how that just released that. And I love that. Now I'm going to, just a reminder, draw that heat back to a medium setting. And of course, we have our light box, our placement guide, and our fabric. We cannot iron directly on the light box. This will damage the light box. So you want to have a pressing mat scooted right next to this so that once you have some shapes in position, you move it over and iron it down. There's so many shapes on each of the backgrounds that I think you need to try to find a manageable amount versus trying to lay out the whole thing. There really aren't any shapes that lie underneath any other shape, which I love that. I love that each shape really is on its own. For that reason, I'm not using an applique pressing sheet, which is used for layering of applique on top of each other. There is none of that. So you may want to start your applique where you're kind of moving in the top left region. Maybe lay the pieces out here, move it, iron them down. Maybe work in this lower left portion, move it, iron them down. I just think trying to have this many pieces laid out and trying to move this to the side without bumping something is just unrealistic. So let me go ahead and turn that light box right back on. And let's just find some shapes. So here, and if you love puzzles, you know, you're going to love this journey of where does this piece go? And I can see that's going to go here. Now, here's what's fun. This fabric is so dynamic, and where the laser cuts each shape, we don't necessarily, it's going to vary from literally each piece of fabric we cut to the next. There will be no two quilts that will be identical. And I love that about that. So we'll bring out our next fabric and you'll just lay them down, just like I'm doing, piece by piece. Just enjoy the journey, figuring out where each piece goes. And I'd recommend that, you know, I thought that piece went there, and I can see that it actually goes here. There will be some, just like when you build a puzzle, where you're sure that piece goes there, and you're like, oh, it's just off slightly. Well, it's not its right spot. So you just kind of keep hunting, and you'll just keep along the same process of referring. You say, okay, I can see that this is probably up in this region. I can see that that shape is right in here. And you'll just continue to lay all the shapes out. And aren't these fabrics spectacular? Let's just pretend I've got this whole thing built out here. What I like to do is I move the entire thing here. And on my medium setting, I iron shapes down. And I just let that sit there for about 5 or 6 seconds. I'll go ahead and turn that off because I know that's quite bright. And I just let that sit there. And then we bring it back. Ideally, you really want to have that whole region done to be able to iron that down. And if you can avoid reheating an area, you want to do that. I think if there's a little bit of contact, it's okay because, again, you're using a medium heat. Once you have all of your shapes down, this is when the thread comes into play. So you can choose to put that same color in the bobbin if you'd like. Obviously, it's going to be on the top. Or you could have a neutral in the bottom. I always love if there's at least a similar color in the bobbin. As far as the applique, the machine applique, we'll give you some close-ups. What we've done here is simply machine stitch just inside the edge by about 1/8 of an inch. We did not attempt to do a satin stitch or blanket stitch or anything of that kind. We are just sewing just inside that edge, which makes it nice and manageable. Simply a straight stitch. And of course, you'll want to machine applique each block before you're assembling all 12 blocks together. So just know that one thing you'll want to be doing that we found when we assembled our blocks is we got even one of the blocks turned a little bit cattywampus. It was turned 90 degrees. So be sure once you get all 12 blocks laid out that you do put them on a design wall or lay them out, making sure that you are sewing them together in the proper arrangement. And then you're just going to go ahead and quilt and bind that. So we think this one is going to be an actual showstopper. We would love to see your progress along the way. Join the conversation, of course, on all of our social media. And if you haven't already subscribed to our email campaign, as you know, that's where we announce these new programs. And of course, you never want to miss out on what's new at Shabby. So thanks for giving me a good part of your day. Enjoy the journey of the Enchanted Garden Block of the month, and I'll see you soon.